Hello there! In this lesson we're going to learn about the circulatory system. In a circulatory system you have some kind of pump that we usually call a heart and some kind of fluid that gets pumped through little pipes or tubes, and that fluid goes in circles. That's where the circulation or circulatory term comes from, and ends up back at the pump or the heart. We're going to focus on human circulatory system, which is going to focus on our heart and the features that it has, and then our blood and the features of the little tubes and pipes that carry the blood through the body and back to the heart. So as a little overview, let's have a look at our circulatory system here. Of course, it's going to contain blood. Blood is the fluid that moves from place to place through the circulatory system. Blood is considered to be a connective tissue because it is in contact with more than one organ and goes from place to place. The pump we call the heart, which is going to move that blood from place to place through the body. The tubes that carry the blood we call blood vessels, and they are going to carry the blood away from the heart and back towards the heart after it has delivered the nutrients to the cells. Our circulatory system, the one in humans, is called a closed system. That's because the blood is always inside of the blood vessels, and there are creatures that have an open circulatory system where it isn't always in a blood vessel and sometimes is free to flow between the cells without being in any of the tubes. Okay, so where does all this blood go? Well, one pathway, one of these circuits, is going to the lungs. You're going to carry blood that has a lot of carbon dioxide to the lungs and get rid of it there and pick up some oxygen and bring it back. Another place that the blood will go in a circle would be out to those body cells, taking some of that oxygen with them and bringing back the carbon dioxide gas that's a waste from the body cells. We already did the digestive system, so you understand that blood has to travel to the digestive system to pick up nutrients and then bring those nutrients back. All those things like proteins and carbohydrates and fats that those body cells need. Once it's back in the heart, of course, it can connect up with the blood that's going to the body cells. It all kind of gets mixed together, carry those nutrients there. Finally, we have other waste products besides carbon dioxide, and to get rid of those, we've got to go to the excretory system, which is starts at your kidneys. You're going to take your wastes there, and they can be excreted, and then the blood that comes back has fewer of those wastes, and it's kind of like cleaning the blood of the wastes from the body cells. So there's a lot of interactive circulating as nutrients are picked up from one place, dropped off at another, and wastes also have to be gotten rid of as well from all those body cells. Alrighty, so let's talk a little bit about what is in the blood. If you take a sample of blood, put it in a test tube, and then spin it around really, really fast in a device called a centrifuge, the centrifuge will separate things based on their density. So the most dense stuff, more dense, will be at the bottom, and the less dense will be at the top. And what you end up with are these fractions that make up the blood. So the first fraction at the top here, that's the plasma, and that's kind of the liquid part of the blood. It contains dissolved nutrients and proteins that are being carried from place to place in the blood. The bottom big fraction here are your red blood cells. There's lots and lots of them. They're the ones that are carrying the oxygen. They don't have a nucleus. They lose that as part of their development in our bone marrow. And they have lots and lots of a protein called hemoglobin that carries oxygen from place to place in the blood. The last fraction, this little bit in the middle here, is two other types of cells. First one are called white blood cells. And they're these big ones, and they do have a nucleus, and their job is to attack and destroy any foreign material. So if you get an infection, whether it's a virus or bacteria, those ones will attack it and destroy it, and they're part of your immune system. The other part is this neat little safety feature. They are platelets. Platelets are these little yellow things. They're like cell fragments. They don't have a nucleus either. And the way that they work is if there's damage to the blood vessel, they'll stick together with some of the proteins that are dissolved in the plasma and form a clot. And that is a protective measure so that you're not going to bleed away if you get some damage to your, at least minor damage to your blood vessels. They'll clot and heal that up, which is quite remarkable. So let's have a look at some of the tissues that make up the heart, the pump of the circulatory system. Of course, there's going to be lots of muscle tissue, special muscle tissue, cardiac muscle, that is unique in that it all contracts at once. It's different than, say, the muscles in your arm that you can like partially contract or put varying amounts of pressure. That's not what cardiac muscle does. It contracts fully, sort of all or nothing. Second type of tissues you'll find in here are nerve tissues, also unique to the heart. These nerves will signal the heart to beat without any external influence. Like your brain doesn't have to tell your heart to pump. It has an internal system of nerves that continuously signal the heart to pump. Now, of course, the heart rate can increase or decrease depending on needs of the body, but that baseline pumping is done by nerves from right within the heart. The last type of tissue is sort of a coating that covers the whole outside of the heart, a lot like the stomach. It's like a smooth connective tissue that keeps the heart movement from interfering or damaging the lungs and other tissues that are nearby. All right, so the human heart has 4 chambers, or 4 spaces inside of it where the blood gets pumped from place to place. The smaller ones at the top are called atria, and the larger ones at the bottom are called ventricles. So this is an atria, and this is an atria, and this is a ventricle, and this is a ventricle. Now you can see that there's 2 sides. On the right-hand side of the person's body, that'll be the left-hand side of the diagram. So this is called the right atrium, even though it's on the left-hand side of the diagram, because it is the right side of the person's body that it's in, right? And this would be the left-hand side of that person's body. And so over here, you're going to have the left atrium. And it's the same thing at the bottom, call this side the right ventricle, this side the left ventricle. And so there you go, you got your 4 chambers. Now, there are 2 basic circuits then that this pump pumps to and from. First of all, blood is going to come back through from the body. And it's used up its oxygen. It's carrying a bunch of carbon dioxide. It's going to enter the right atrium. It's going to get pumped down into this right ventricle and then pumped out to the lungs. And that's called the pulmonary circuit. Once it's there, you're going to pick up some oxygen, get rid of the carbon dioxide, then it's going to come back from the lungs into the left atrium, down into the left ventricle, and then out through this big blood vessel. It's called the aorta, and out to the body. And so there you go, 2 circuits, 1 heart. So a little wider view of the 2 circuits that the heart is pumping blood to. The first one is called the pulmonary circuit. And the way it works is that deoxygenated blood is going to come back from the tissues of the body, both from the upper parts, like your arms and your head, and the lower parts, like your legs. And that's going to come into this right atrium here. Then that blood is going to get pumped down, of course, into the right ventricle, and then out to the lungs. The heart is like right here in between the 2 lungs, so it splits like right away, so some of the blood goes to each lung. Once it's at the lungs, so it's going to go up here, pick up the oxygen, and then come back over here. That's the pulmonary circuit, going to the lungs and back. Then what happens is when you get back, the left-hand side of the heart is going to be pumping blood to the systemic circuit. And so that means pumping the blood that now has lots of oxygen out to the body tissues and back. So it comes back in through the left atria, down into the left ventricle, out through the aorta, the big blood vessel there at the top of the heart, then back to the upper body, branches off right away, back to the head, the arms, and down behind the heart, down to those lower body tissues, and going to give that oxygen up for completing that circuit. So finally, let's have a look at the blood vessels, starting with arteries. Arteries are the blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart. So usually that's blood that has oxygen in it, like the blood that goes through the aorta, which is the biggest artery. And all these red ones you see in the body over here, those are all going away from the heart. The only one that's an artery that doesn't have a lot of oxygen is the pulmonary artery, which are the two that leave the heart going to the lungs. So even though it is low oxygen, it's still leaving the heart, and so you still call that an artery. Inside of arteries, they are under a lot more pressure than the veins because the heart is pushing on them directly. They're pushing blood through them directly. And so to help out with that, they have this elastic layer that I've sort of represented with this yellow ring that allows them to stretch a little bit with that pressure and keep the flow of blood pretty much constant the whole way through the artery part of the circulatory system. The next blood vessel are the veins. Veins are carrying blood back toward the heart, like these veins here. The only veins that have oxygen in them would be these pulmonary veins that come from the lungs with the oxygenated blood. Usually the oxygen has been used somewhere in the body and they're traveling back towards the heart. All these blue lines on this diagram all represent veins going back towards the heart. Veins are a little different because they're under a lot less pressure. There's no pump, there's no heart pushing on the blood that goes through them directly. And so it's a little more passive. You see there's no elastic layer here because keeping that pressure up with the elastic layer is not necessary. But what they do have are these little valves inside that prevent the blood from going backwards. And so there's a lot less pressure pushing them along. And so keeping the blood going in one direction is key. And so often it's the movement of the individual, the person, that massages the blood back through the veins. And there is low pressure pushing that blood along as it goes. Veins are often more shallow, like near to the surface of the skin. You can see in this image of my hand, I got a lot of veins at the surface of my hand, carrying the blood back up my arm and towards my heart. So finally, we get to the capillaries, which are the bridge between artery and vein. What happens is that the arteries branch off from one another, get smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually you get to these teeny tiny little blood vessels called capillaries. Now capillaries are so thin and so small that the nutrients and gases can be exchanged right through the wall of the cell. And so nutrients can leave the capillaries and travel into the space between the cells that are nearby. Waste can dissolve the other way, back into the bloodstream to be carried away, whether it's to the lungs to get rid of CO2 or to the kidneys to get rid of other waste products of the cell. And so that thin layer where the blood cells sort of line up and travel through one at a time to deliver the oxygen, to deliver the nutrients, and to take away wastes. That happens in the capillaries, and that's the little bridge between arteries and veins where the magic happens, where the whole purpose of the circulatory system is realized, delivering all those essential components to the living cells. Okay, I hope that was helpful. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.